Welcome to this session. Today we are going to discuss FTDR Act 1992 and the foreign trade policy. If we try to understand the FTDR Act 1992, it replaced the earlier Act Import and Export Control Act 1947. Foreign Trade Development and Regulation Act 1992, it was notified in the Gazette of India on 7th August 1992. And the basic objective of FTDR Act 1992 is to provide a framework for development and regulation of foreign trade by facilitating import into the country as well as taking measures to increase export from India. So, basically the FTDR Act deals with the import and export from India. If we try to understand the salient feature of the FTDR Act 1992, it basically focuses on formulation of export and import policy, that is EXIM policy. This is the earlier name of the foreign trade policy. No person can enter into import or export businesses in India without importer exporter code number, which means IEC code, which is issued by DGFT. Issuance and suspension or cancellation of license, search, seizure, penalty and confiscation, appeal and revision provision. So, these are the general provisions which are available in the FTDR Act. If we go further, in the FTDR Act there is a provision that foreign trade exemption from application of rules in certain cases, order 1993. It means that there are certain organizations which are exempted from the provision of FTDR rules. It lists the institutions and entities for export as well as the imports on which rules under FTDR Act 1992 are not applicable. Under this FTDR Act, government is empowered to frame the rules, and the rules have been framed as Foreign Trade Regulation Rules 1993, which basically provides the operational provisions such as fee requirements for issuance of licenses, conditions of licenses, refusal, suspension and cancellation of licenses, etc. If you understand the foreign trade policy, section 5 of the FTDR Act 1992, it empowers the government of India or central government to formulate and notify the export import policy, which we presently call as foreign trade policy. This foreign trade policy is conventionally been formulated for 5 years at a time and review annually, and if you see that currently we are dealing with the foreign trade policy of 2015 to 2020. The focus of the foreign trade policy is to provide a framework of rules and procedures for export and imports and a set of incentives for promoting exports. And if we understand the bottom line of the foreign trade policy, the objective is very clearly given that the trade is not earning more foreign exchange, but it is to generate greater economic activity for an all round development of the country. So, basically foreign trade policy focus on the economic development of the country. If we understand the key documents of the foreign trade policy, it is primarily comprised of 3 documents. One is the foreign trade policy, which is a policy document, handbook of procedure which explain the detailed procedures and appendices which are required to implement the policy, and another one is the ITCHS classification book, which is a very bulky document which is compiled and issued by office of DGFT. So, this ITCHS classification book, it explains all the items with 8-digit level classification, and against each items export import policy is indicated, means whether the product falls under the category of free, restricted or prohibited category. If we understand the free, restricted or prohibited, it means the free terms is used for the items for which any licensing is not required, they are freely to be traded. In case of restricted items, the licensing or some registration part is required. For prohibited item, they cannot be exported or imported in any situation. Prerequisite of import and export. So, if any person want to export or import from India, they need to have import exporter code, IEC code what we call. It is issued by the office of DGFT, And for getting a IEC number from DGFT, there are certain documentary requirement like completion of the field application form along with a fee, copy of the PAN card, permanent account number, banker's statement, statutory declaration regarding NRI interest in the prescribed form, basic idea about different export promotion schemes. So, any exporter or importer who want to do a trade, they need to have a IEC number. Now, we will try to understand some of the key export promotion schemes which have been made available by the Government of India to promote the trade. One is Export Promotion Capital Goods Scheme, EPCG scheme, Duty Exemption Scheme, DES, Export Oriented Unit Scheme means 100% export oriented scheme, Special Economic Zone, SEZ scheme and Status Holder scheme. So, we will discuss these schemes one by one in details. Export Promotion Capital Goods Schemes, EPCG schemes. So, this schemes allows the import of capital goods at concessional basic custom duty of only 5%. This permission to import capital goods at concessional duty also puts on the unit importing under the scheme an export obligations. So, they have an export obligation that equivalent to 8 times of the duty saved on import of capital goods. So, this export obligation need to be met by the countries within 8 years from the getting the permission or authorization under the EPCG scheme. But there are certain category of items like for agri products, this export obligation is for 5 years. Duty exemption scheme. These schemes where import of inputs and raw materials required for the exports are allowed duty free for use in the export productions. And there are two types of schemes under this DES schemes, advanced authorization scheme, earlier it used to call as advanced license scheme, and another one is duty free import authorization DFIA scheme, and another one is the duty exemption scheme. Under duty exemption scheme there is one duty remission scheme also which enables an authorization holder to get remission of the duty on the inputs used in the export production, that is duties on the input used for exports are refunded after the export have been made. So, basic difference between the exemption and remission is that in case of exemptions the exporter is not required to pay the duty, but in case of remission once he has to pay the duty but it is refunded back to him. Duty remission schemes are duty entitlement passbook scheme DEPB and duty drawback scheme DBK. The three schemes are run by the DGFT, but the duty drawbacks scheme falls under the Department of Customs. In case of DEPB scheme, there are DEPB schedules defined under which items are defined and against which what type of remissions are allowed, it is indicated. Similarly, for duty drawback schemes, drawback schedules are defined by the Department of Customs and details are given. The next scheme is export oriented unit scheme, 100% EOU scheme. This scheme was introduced in early 90s as a result of Prakash Tandon committee report, and the basic aim of this scheme is to provide duty free and control free regime of export production without placing any restriction on the location of the unit. These export oriented units are approved only for manufacturing and services and no trading is allowed. So, basically they act in manufacturing and services. These units are required to export their entire production of goods and services except for a small percentage which is allowed to be sold within the country. So, basically they are provided, these export oriented units are provided with certain facilities by Government of India under the schemes like tax exemptions or different licensing or SSI unit type of registration is not required. Next scheme is Special Economic Zone SEZ scheme, which is basically a foreign territory within the country as far as different taxes and duties are concerned. Any movement of goods from DTA to SEZ constitute export of DTA unit, and any transfer from SEZ to DTA constitute export for the SEZ unit. So even being within the country, the SEZs are the like a different territory for the country itself. Special Economic Zone Scheme, the developer of SEZs are eligible for various tax and duty exemptions. A developer of a SEZ is exempted from income tax as per section 80 IA of the IT Act. Import or procurement of capital goods and inputs is made by SEZ without payment of any custom or excise duty. SEZs are also exempted from the payment of CST as well as service tax. The next scheme is Status Holder Scheme. In this scheme, exporters are categorized as export house, a star export house, trading house, star trading house and premier trading house based on their export performances. So if we see in this table, we can find out that which trade house will be termed as export house, star export house based on their performances in the current financial year plus previous 3 years taken together, and the amount is calculated in terms of rupees crore. The schemes we discussed in the previous slides, these are primarily were in the function during the foreign trade policy 2004 to 2009, but currently if we say that the foreign trade policy 2015 to 2020 is in operation, and before moving to that foreign trade policy, if we try to see India trade performance through these figures, basically we are a import oriented country and we are importing a lot of products. India export of merchandise is 313 billion US dollar and we are on 19th rank all over the world. As far as the commercial services export is concerned, we are 6th in position. India's import of merchandise is 466 billion US dollar and we are 12th rank in the world. As far as the import of commercial services is concerned, we are 9th rank in the world. And if we say India's export destination, primarily means the major market is USA and Europe, which constitute our major export markets. And if we see the foreign trade policy 2015 to 2020, which is currently in operation, the vision of this foreign trade policy is to make India a significant participant in world trade by the year 2020 and to enable the country to assume a position of leadership in the international trade discourse. And the mission of FTP 2015-20 is to increase India's export of merchandise and services from USD 465.9 billion in 2013-14 to approximately 900 billion US dollar by 2019-20, and to raise India's share in world export from 2% which is currently to 3.5% in 2020. The objective of the foreign trade policy 2015-20 is a stable and sustainable policy environment for foreign trade in merchandise and services, link rules, procedures and incentives for export and imports with other initiatives such as Make in India, Digital India, Skill India to create an export promotion mission, promote the diversification of India's export basket to gain global competitiveness, create an architecture for India's global trade engagement with a view to expanding its market and better integrated with the major regions. So, regional development is also one of the concept or objective of this foreign trade policy, and promoting the Make in India initiative to provide a mechanism for regular appraisal in order to rationalize the import and reduce the trade imbalance. So, there is always a mechanism to review the foreign trade policy. Yearly it is reviewed and changes are made accordingly. If we try to understand the key features of the foreign trade policy 2015-20, there is one merchandise exporters from India scheme, MEIS. So, 5 different schemes which were operating earlier, they have been merged into a single scheme, namely merchandise export from India schemes. So, in this scheme, the no conditionality attached to the scrips issued under the scheme. Rewards for the exporters of the notified goods to the notified markets under MEIS shall be payable as percentage of the realized FOB value. The debits toward basic custom duty in the transferable reward duty credit scrips would also be allowed adjustment as duty drawback. So, under different schemes, the adjustment is allowed in terms of the credit gained under the schemes. Next scheme is service exports from India schemes, SEIS schemes. This scheme served from India schemes has been replaced with SEIS SEIS. SEIS shall apply to service providers located in India instead of Indian service providers. Thus, SEIS provides for rewards to all service providers of notified services who are providing services from India. So, the requirement is that you operate from India. So, made in India concept is being promoted through this scheme regardless of the constitutions or profile of the service provider, but the service provider could be from any constitution or profile. Service exports from India scheme, SEIS scheme, the rate of reward under SEIS would be based on net foreign exchange earned. The reward issued as duty credit scripts would no longer be with the actual user condition and will no longer be restricted to usage for specific type of goods, but be freely transferable and usable for all types of goods and services. So, it is not restricted to the types of good from which you have earned the credit under the scheme. Status holder scheme, business leaders who have excelled in international trade and have successfully contributed to countries' foreign trade are to be recognized as status holders and given special treatment and privileges to facilitate their trade. So, this scheme was in operation earlier also, but the only minor changes have been done in terms of the export performance of these status holders. The nomenclature of the export house, export house, which was existing in the earlier scheme has been changed to the 1 star, 2 star, 3 star, 4 star, 5 star export house. The criteria for export performance, which was earlier in terms of rupees crore, it has now been changed from rupees to the US dollar earnings. And these are the different status holders criteria based on which the status category is given as 1 star export house. If the export performance is 3 million US dollar, and for 2 star 25 million US dollar, for 3 star 100 million US dollar, 4 star 500 million US dollar, and 5 star 2000 million US dollar. This FTP 2015-20 focus on the boosting the Make in India campaign, specific export obligation under EPCG scheme in case capital goods are procured from indigenous manufacturers, which is currently 90% of the normal export obligation, has been reduced to 75% in order to promote domestic capital goods manufacturing industry. Higher level of rewards to products with high domestic contents and value addition as compared to the products with high import content and less value addition. There are some aspects have been included in the Foreign Trade Policy 2015-20 regarding trade facilitation and ease of doing business. Online filing of the documents and application has been allowed, and the focus is on paperless trade in 24/7 environments. So, basically there is a focus on facilitating the trade, less documentation required and online filing of the documents. Lending documents of the export consignments as proof for notified market can be digitally uploaded. So, e-governance is also one of the major goal of this Foreign Trade Policy 2015. For trade facilitations, validity of SEO-MET export authorization has been extended from present 12 months to 24 months, means more time leverage has been provided. Authorization for repeat orders will be considered on automatic basis subject to certain conditions. So, it means no need to apply again and again for authorizations. Verification of end user certificate is being simplified if SEO-MET item is being exported under defense export offset policy. E-commerce is being promoted under Foreign Trade Policy 2015-20. Goods falling in the category of handloom products, books, periodicals, leather footwear, toys and customized fashion garments having FOB value up to 25,000 per consignment shall be eligible for the benefits under FTP. Such goods can be exported in manual code through foreign post offices at New Delhi, Mumbai and Chennai. Certain duty exemptions are also provided and proposed in the Foreign Trade Policy 2015-20. Imports against advance authorization shall also be eligible for exemption from transitional product specific safeguard duty. In order to encourage manufacturing of capital goods in India, imports under EPCG authorization schemes shall not be eligible for exemption from payment of anti-dumping duty, safeguard duty and transitional products specific safeguard duty. Calicut Airport, Kerala, Aranakolam, ICD, Tamil Nadu has been notified as additional registered ports for the import and export. Extended duty free tariff preference to 33 least developed country across the globe. So, from overall from this session we can understand that foreign trade policy is an important document in the WTO regime. Also the WTO has a provision for the reviewing the foreign trade policy. This review provide an opportunity to different trading partners of the India to see what are the new things which is coming in Indian foreign trade policy, and if they feel that there is some going to impact on their trade, they can come for bilateral discussion with the India or other trading partners whose trade policy is going under review. That is all for this session. Thank you.